I'm Evelyn, and I'm a geoholic.
All right, we made it. I'm not quite sure how, but here we are, episode 180. Man, oh man, about 5 minutes ago, I didn't know if we were going to make this happen tonight or not.
I had full faith in you.
You did. You had this calming presence, and I was like, okay, if he's not too amped up, I'm not going to be too amped up. So needless to say, producer Sean is on vacation this week. He is traveling as we speak to the Gorge in Washington State to see the last, 2 or 3 Dead and Company shows. So, yes, I'm sure he's going to come back with some amazing stories if he can remember them.
Or a tattoo or so.
Or something. Yeah, exactly. he's going to get a tattoo on his bald head.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I saw this guy's tattoo one time. I was sitting on a plane, and the guy literally in the seat in front of me, he was bald, and on the back of his head, he had a tattoo of like a little cartoon character pushing a lawnmower. It was freaking hilarious.
Okay, that's cool.
Is that awesome?
Worthy, yeah.
Yes, I got a picture of it somewhere. I took a picture of it. So anyways, real quick introduction. We have Larry Fox joining us this evening as my co-host. Larry, for those listening that don't know who you are, quick and dirty introduction.
So, Larry Fox, I am the VP of Marketing and Biz Dev over at Bad Elf, and you could also call me Chief Cook and Bottle Washer. So, engineering nerd, business guy, jack of all trades. I love everything.
And preparing to go to Esri User Conference.
Yes, very
You guys
excited.
will be there next week, you said? You got a booth set up, or you're going to?
Oh, I'm definitely going. Who's going to miss San Diego in July?
I know, I'm so jealous. It's 115 today or something here in Phoenix. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's just a little warm. I kind of like that. Oh, it's a hot day. It's 79 versus 75.
Yeah. This is the time of year I question my decision to live here. But 8 months out of the year, maybe 9, I love living in Phoenix. But 3 months out of the year, I'm like, what am I doing?
Having come from the Midwest,
yes,
there's the 6 months that you're inside.
That's true.
It's cold. So.
That's true. All right, before we move on, I got to make sure that I mention the 2023 National Scout Jamboree that is coming up, in just a couple of weeks, July 17th through the 19th in West Virginia. And this is where scouts from across the country get together in the spirit of scouting. Kyle Schultz is the booth coordinator for the Surveying Merit Badge, and he is looking for volunteers and donations to help support the booth. If you are interested in volunteering or donating to support the surveying booth, please email Kyle at kyle.schultze, that's spelled SCHULTZE, at gmail.com. Kyle.schultze@gmail.com. It's a great cause, and I'm sure he would love to hear from you. If you remember, back in the day, which was pre-COVID, the United Surveyors of Arizona sponsored the Boy Scout badge, or Boy Scout Survey Merit Badge for the Boy Scouts here in Arizona, and it was amazing, the turnout. It was super rewarding, tons of kids. They got super excited about the little activities that we set up for them and everything, and it was just really, really cool.
I've done the Boy Scout jamborees.
You did?
The geocaching badge.
Oh, really?
And that was just
that is awesome. Yeah, very rewarding. So if you're at all interested, reach out to Kyle. One thing I want to mention, and this is something that's been driving me crazy, and hopefully I am not the only one, and I'm going totally off topic here. USB ports. Okay, am I the only one that when I go to plug in a USB port, every single time it is upside down? It never goes in right the first time.
So one of my business partners actually said USB ports need to be plugged in 3 times.
Oh.
You plug it in thinking it's the wrong way, and then you flip it around and it's actually the wrong way, and then you plug it in the right way.
So I'm not the only one.
Yes.
I just had to get that out there because today, for whatever reason, I was plugging in a bunch of even when we were scrambling here before the show, I was like plugging in USB ports and none of them were going in right the first time. I'm like, this drives me insane. So I'm not the only one. That's good. All right. You're up. Tell us about that opening number, Larry.
So it's Don't Stop by Fleetwood Mac. Fleetwood Mac is a British-American rock band formed in London in 1967. Fleetwood Mac has sold more than 120 million records worldwide, making them one of the world's best-selling bands. In 1979, the group was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 98, the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and received the Brit Award for Outstanding Contribution to Music. In 2018, the band received the Music Cares Person of the Year Award from the Recording Academy in recognition of their artistic achievement in the music industry and dedication to philanthropy.
Legendary band, no doubt. And a lot of history. I know there's like some marriages that failed within the band and stuff like that. And I got to tell you, when I was a younger man and listening to Fleetwood Mac, like in my formidable teenage years, I used to think Stevie Nicks is pretty hot.
I would have to agree.
Yeah, so I'm not the only one there either.
Yes. Her voice is so iconic.
Yep.
You have so many people trying to emulate it. It's just, you hear Stevie Nicks and you go,
you can't. It's so unique. And she just got like this aura about her. And it's like mysterious. You know, she's like a very mysterious human being. And I believe she lives here in the Valley.
She had a place over in Paradise Valley.
Yeah.
I don't know if she still has it. She did this whole communal living thing with a bunch of family members. Yeah. Yeah, she was out here for a while.
She may be cohabitating with, whatchamacallit, Cooper, Alice Cooper. Maybe those two are cohabitating. I can see them too.
I could see that. She's an Arizona native.
Yeah. I'm sure they're good friends.
Yeah.
They've probably done some drugs together, I would imagine. I don't know. I'm making that up. We are in the Wisdom Wednesdays studio, and a little news here. There's a new Trent involved with Wisdom Wednesdays. That's Trent Williams, another really good guy. Maybe it's something with the name Trent. Maybe all Trents are really good guys. I don't know. But over the last season, I guess, of Wisdom Wednesdays, they have gone chapter by chapter through one of the survey Bibles, the evidence and procedures for boundary location. Like I said, they've gone through chapter by chapter, and they're taking a little bit of a break here in the summer. But Trent Williams is taking the time to basically summarize all of the chapters and the discussions that were had. So that information is going to be available on wisdomwednesdays.xyz. And just a heads up, when they start up the next season, they're going to be doing the same thing, but with the land survey descriptions manual, another really good one. So Mentoring Mondays, Wisdom Wednesdays, tons of opportunity there to get some really good survey education firsthand. Larry, you're up again. Tell us about this week's Airworks somewhat random trivia. And this is very fitting for our guest this evening.
Oh, this is actually quite exciting. So a couple of fun facts. Archaeologists study human societies that lived in the past through the discovery and analysis of the things that they left behind. This includes artifacts from millions of years ago right up to the things developed in recent times. Another interesting thing is there are no written records for 99% of human history. This is one of the reasons why archaeology is so important. Archaeologists survey, excavate, and analyze data to help us understand the past. Archaeology is a very discipline that can involve aspects of art history, classics, physics, chemistry, geography, and other fields. And finally, if you want to become an archaeologist, it's a good idea to study areas such as statistics, geography, and geology.
Good stuff right there.
Absolutely.
I've always had interest in archaeology, but I'm just like, can you make a living doing it? I don't know, but we're going to find out. We're going to loop our guest here, and he's going to let us know if you can or can't. But before we get there, we have to do the Advanced Geodetic Survey's weekly Words of Wisdom. This week, we have a quote, again, archaeology-centric. Here we go. Archaeology is the peeping Tom of the sciences. It is the sandbox of men who care not where they are going. They merely want to know where everyone else has been. And that was, of course, Jim Bishop, who was an American journalist and author. I think we should get our guest in here so he can clear up all this stuff. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, we're not archaeologists.
We are far from it. All right. we have Hunter Whitehead with us this evening. A little bit about Hunter before we allow him to jump into this circus. He was born in Brenham, Texas, home of Bluebell ice cream. Big fan of Bluebell ice cream. He earned a BA and MA in historical archaeology at the University of West Florida. Larry, do you know what the mascot is of University of West Florida?
That's a good question.
Go Argonauts.
The Argonauts.
The Argonauts, yes. His hobbies include he is an adamant book collector. I'm going to get to the bottom of that. And his current position is he works at Search Inc., where he helps manage the Maritime Archaeology division. Hunter, welcome to the Geoholics.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on the show. And I've been waiting to say this. I swear I always plug in my USB about 4 or 5 times before I go, so I'm right there
Nice.
with you.
I am so glad it's not just me. So glad. Well, let's get to know Hunter a little bit. So you grew up in Texas, and you are an archaeologist. So was there something in your childhood that happened that you think kind of put you on the track as far as this career decision goes?
You know, I don't think there's anything related to growing up in Texas that might have led me to become an archaeologist, but I do remember visiting the battleship USS Texas as a kid, and that had a big impact. What kid doesn't like, crawling all over a World War I, World War II battleship? But also my family used to take me on vacations to Galveston, and there's an aviation museum there that I absolutely love visiting. I mean, it was like every year. Yeah, I'm sure my family was like, again, really? You want to go to this thing again?
Oh, man, that's awesome. And being a book collector, do you have something in your collection that is like a prized possession?
Probably not a prized possession to anyone else but myself and maybe a few colleagues of mine. I've got a bunch of old underwater archaeology reports from like the 60s and the 70s. And like I said, nobody else would care about these, but someone who's really integrated into this field. And over the years, I've become a big eBayer, and kind of found some pretty rare things in terms of books that were signed by some of the earliest underwater archaeologists, George Bass and some of these early guys. So.
Interesting. And last but not least, before we get into the meat of this, talk about Search Inc. I mean, cool name for a company, obviously, but what's a typical day like for you? Talk about the company culture, if you like, or just in general, what do you love about your job?
Well, I like to say, and I'm pretty new into search, but I like to say that we not only search, but we find. So search is what we call a full suite cultural heritage firm. We cover terrestrial and underwater archaeology, architectural history, tribal consultation. And so, like you said, I help manage the Maritime Archaeology Division's projects across the country and across the world. And that mostly consists of geophysical remote sensing surveys and shipwreck investigations. And so I do get to do some pretty exciting stuff. The day-to-day is usually handling logistics for field crew travel, client calls, budgeting projects, permit applications, the nitty-gritty stuff that it has to get done. But what I do love about my job is that about as soon as I'm tired of being in the office, I get to go back out into the field and vice versa.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have that flexibility. So I have to be honest with you, before I started doing research about this episode, I had no idea there was such a thing as maritime archaeology.
Neither did I.
I consider you a very intelligent human being, Larry, and the fact that you've never even heard of it doesn't make me feel so bad.
Yeah, I've worked with at ASU with a number of classical archaeologists, and it was like an aha moment.
Exactly.
Well, yes. Of course you would look at things under the water as well.
Exactly. So on that note, Hunter, tell us what maritime archaeology is.
Well, it's kind of been touched on. So archaeology is the study of past peoples through the lens of what they left behind or artifacts, right? And so maritime archaeology happens to focus on maritime activity and archaeological sites that have been found in submerged environments. When people think of maritime archaeology, they tend to think mostly about shipwrecks, right? But that's actually a pretty narrow view of the subject as a whole, because there are not only shipwrecks found underwater, but there's submerged cities, roads, ports, airplanes. There's all kinds of stuff that can be found. And if you think about it, virtually all people are connected by some maritime activity, even if they live in the interior. So even today, people in Nebraska, people in Nevada, they're receiving products that arrived from like a cargo ship, right? So they're connected, and actually archaeological studies have shown that it's not a new phenomenon. Even inland first peoples of the Americas were trading with coastal societies. So it's an important aspect of archaeology, but not only that, to society as a whole.
Gotcha. And why is this important?
Well, it's important to me because I get a paycheck.
Yeah, there you go.
Doing my job. But no, it's important to everybody, because I think if you don't think about your past, the typical, you're not going to learn from your mistakes, etc. But also I just think it's interesting, and it correlates to human culture, the arts, etc.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned just a second ago, you mentioned like the state of Nevada, and that with like the water shortages and stuff like that, and like Lake Mead and the water levels, they dropped to a historic low, and all of a sudden all these like old ships started appearing and barrels with dead bodies and things like that. Does that fall under maritime archaeology?
Not necessarily. Not with the dead bodies and barrels and things of that nature. I'm sure they're using some of the same technology to find some of those things. And actually, random tidbit, I may have been involved in one of the only few underwater archaeological investigations in Nevada. In grad school, I was helping a buddy with his PhD dissertation work out in Lake Walker, and he was looking for what would have been terrestrial sites that are now underwater.
Oh my God, that's awesome. So cool. I remember, and maybe you've heard the story, and maybe it's complete bullshit, but I can remember, I grew up in Chicago, and we spent a lot of time as a kid on Lake Geneva, which is just over the border in Wisconsin. And I had heard that they had found pieces of ships that sunk in Lake Michigan in Lake Geneva, and vice versa. That ships or boats that sunk in Lake Geneva, they found pieces of them in Lake Michigan. Like there was some sort of underground canal or cave that connected the two bodies of water. I have no idea. Does that sound even possible, or am I completely crazy?
Yeah, probably, but no, I really can't.
Highly unlikely.
I'd love to look into that. That sounds fascinating.
I'm going to find, there's got to be an article out there. Either that or me, my dad was just like filling my head with bullshit. I don't know.
Now, the interesting thing is, and maybe you could gut check me on this. So I learned to scuba dive in Illinois, and I had heard that Lake Michigan has one of the highest count of shipwrecks.
Interesting.
I don't know the statistics on that, but I imagine it's true. Purely, there's a lot of maritime trading activity in that area, but also the preservation potential of the fresh water in that area.
Sure.
If you think about it, salt water it corrodes anything. Look at you've got docks that are just degrading over time within the last 50 years. Now you put several hundred years, there's not going to be anything left of a shipwreck.
So all of this, I mean, first of all, I find it absolutely fascinating. How does this contribute to our understanding, let's say, of just history and ancient civilizations in general?
Um, so to answer that, I got to say first that I'm a historical archaeologist, and I really focus on American history and rather recent history, actually. So my knowledge of ancient civilizations is rather limited. But what I can say is some of the earliest underwater investigations in the Mediterranean, like in the 1960s, like Dr. George Bass from Texas A&M and others, they uncovered a ton of information that was unknown at the time about fourth and fifth century trade networks and naval battles, and there's so much there's recorded information, but there's so little known beyond what maybe one person wrote down. And so you kind of, when you're recording a shipwreck, you get glimpses into the lives of people that lived through history, like fascinating events. And so, personally, I like to study World War II aviation, which is a bit more tangible to some people because family members, maybe they remember when a ship or an aircraft went down with a loved one. And so in the study of recent shipwreck or airwrecks, we can essentially bring closure to some of those families, which I think is
Yeah.
kind of an admirable and important mission.
Yeah, no question. So, like, what's like, and I don't know if you know this or not, but like, what's one of the oldest shipwrecks that's ever been discovered?
Oh, I can't think of one right now. I know they were just in the news within the last 10 years. There's some of the oldest shipwrecks that were found in the Black Sea.
Oh, wow.
Really, really, really deep shipwrecks that probably dated to the I don't want to say centuries, but let's call it the third,
Sure.
second century.
Crazy. That's insane.
Wow.
That's insane. And they're still like preserved somehow. It's incredible.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially with the conditions of the water.
Yeah. Yeah. Like some of those, like, these guys that are like treasure hunters, it's like, that would be the coolest thing. Like to find an old shipwreck, in just a chest of gold or something. You know what I mean? It's like the stuff you dream of as a kid.
Your doubloons.
Yeah.
That's typically the questions that I get, from my family and et cetera, is how much gold have you found? And I'm like,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
none. But
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So like, what is the process like? Like how, just kind of walk us through, like in my notes here, I talk about the discovery process and, some of the challenges, I mean, how do you go about, identifying the site and then, if there's like underwater excavation and just kind of take it from there. I mean, what does the whole process look like?
well, there are obviously multiple ways that people go about it. So in an academic setting, when you've got a little bit more time, you're not pressed for time for construction or something of that nature. You usually have an idea of where a shipwreck is, right? And based on historic maps or other documents, you create a hypothesis and of where you think this wreck is, and then you go after the funding and the grants, and you search for it, with traditional side scan sonar, magnetometers, sub-bottom profilers, things like that. But in my line of work, the question usually is there anything in the way of where construction will be happening, right? So we're given an area that a bridge is going to be put in, and they say, whatever federal agency, state agency says, all right, we're going to pay you to go find if there's anything that we might potentially impact. And we usually go in and say, nope, there's nothing there. So if there is something there, that's when things get potentially interesting, because now, they got to put a bridge in, but now they've got this potentially historic shipwreck. And so they have to do additional investigations, which sometimes looks like scuba diving on the wreck. If they have enough money, we'll do excavations and try to determine, if this thing was really important to the history of the area or to the history of the United States. So then after that, if you get into excavations, you have to have significant permits, significant plans in place, because as soon as you take artifacts, especially wood and iron, out of the water, they're going to degrade very quickly. And so you have to have facilities to hold these artifacts in, and a plan for the future to kind of preserve these things, so they don't just immediately turn to dust.
So these studies, are they done typically ahead of time? Like if somebody, like you said, it was a great example, building a bridge over a waterway, do they call somebody like you and Search Inc. in to do a study to make sure there isn't anything there before they build a bridge? Or is it, oh shit, we're building a bridge and we found something and we don't know what it is, let's call Search Inc.?
Yeah, so it depends on the state and the area or the land that they're doing the construction on. So say in Texas, the Texas DOT is putting in a project. They're going to have someone who's on the environmental planning committee, and they're going to have all the check boxes. We have to make sure that we're not impacting the waterway in any negative way. We're not impacting the bugs and the bunnies, so to speak. We're not impacting, what, on and on and on. And so they're usually in place that we are doing these surveys sometimes years before a construction is even put into place.
Sure.
Now, that being said, sometimes the dots aren't checked, right? And we get a last minute call, and sometimes that's when we have to run out there and do a survey real quick, and maybe our prices are a little higher at that point.
So I'd have to ask, in all these processes, I've got to imagine there's a number of groups of different people that are, a part of a building project. So are you collaborating with geologists who are looking at the suitability of the material that they're going to build a bridge across, for example, or how does that whole process work with the other respective fields that are part of what the project might look like?
So, okay, that's a great question. Yes and no. So, right, like for a bridge survey, the engineers are going to have to understand what the sediment looks like and stability and that sort of thing. So they're going to already collect their own remote sensing data. So sometimes we tag along with those groups and we work side by side. And other times we're kind of an afterthought and we just have to go collect all of our own data. And that kind of just depends on client and money, budgeting.
What type of technology are you guys using to collect that data?
Each state has its own set of requirements. So, but typically it is side scan sonar, sub-bottom profiler, and magnetometer, and then sometimes we have a single beam echo sounder. Just to receive depths.
Interesting.
So one thing that's come up in the terrestrial world that's a big deal, outside of all the metaverse talk and all that, is this whole concept of a digital twin. And it sounds like all the information you're getting is somewhat of an underwater digital twin. Can you maybe talk about what the products that you're producing out of all the collection mechanisms you're using?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm not familiar with that term, digital twin, but I will say it sort of sounds like if you have 3D dimensional data, right?
Yep.
Photogrammetry, which is something I've used for my master's thesis. You can essentially collect a bunch of video or photo data around a site and then plug it into a software, and it essentially will create a replica, a 3D replica of a site, which is absolutely fascinating, and it's something a lot of people are looking at to protect sites instead of someone having to be a scuba diver to go visit a site and potentially negatively impact that site, taking things, and that's kind of human nature, is want to take a piece of it home. We instead put the digital model online, and you can go in and it's like you're there. And not only for scuba divers, people who can't scuba dive, they can actually experience that. And I don't know much about the metaverse, but maybe that's something we should look into.
Yeah. Hey, there's a new business model.
There you go.
Brad Elf.
Yeah.
So how many maritime archaeologists are there? I mean, is there, again, I'm thinking it's got to be a pretty small fraternity of archaeologists.
Well, practicing archaeologists or someone who has a maritime archaeology degree, it's kind of hard to say. I do think there are studies out there that kind of gauge these things, and I would probably say practicing, have a job, maritime archaeologist, it's got to be sub 100, something like that.
Wow,
and we
that's
all
crazy.
We all go to the same events, same conferences. So
that's awesome.
It's a pretty tight community.
Super cool. And, I know like in the bio information you sent us, you've worked on some really cool, unique projects. Maybe talk about a couple of those.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I always have to say, probably the best experience as an underwater archaeologist is getting to actually physically be on a shipwreck and be digging and trying to find something on a shipwreck. And I got to do that during grad school in Pensacola, Florida, on an excavation of a 1559 Spanish colonial shipwreck called the Emmanuel Point II shipwreck. And so that wreck was one of Conquistador Tristan de Luna's ships in his attempt to colonize Florida. And so if you don't know, most of his fleet sank during that storm, and eventually his colonization attempt failed. So that was just incredible. I excavated portions of the shipwreck.
It's awesome.
There's ballast stone, pottery fragments, cannonballs, stone cannonballs.
Wow.
Leather shoe soles, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it just as a young, I must have been 21, 22 years old at that point. That was just, probably just the coolest.
Yeah. I can imagine when you see something like that, you're hooked. It's like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
I got to figure out a way how to make money doing this.
Yeah. Who's doing this?
Exactly. Right. And what was the, something about, like planes as well? Is there something about planes? I mean, in addition to ships, but
That's sort of my specialty. I mean, I think there's probably maybe a dozen archaeologists out there who focus on aviation archaeology, which is the study of airplane wrecks and other artifacts associated. So that was my master's degree. I did my thesis on a couple World War II era, post World War II era airplanes that crashed during training in Pensacola.
Wow.
And so I've got a bunch of ongoing projects, and that's one of them is continuing to look for these dozens and dozens of aircraft that crashed off the coast there. And I've got the Naval History and Heritage Command's Underwater Archaeology branch. We're actively surveying off the coast, looking for these things. So there's going to be a lot of news stories, hopefully in the next few years, about us finding a bunch of them.
So cool. There's going to be there's probably geospatial archaeologists. I think we're onto something here.
I think we are.
And what do you think?
We know so little about getting to space is easier than getting under most of the ocean. Would you tend to agree?
Right. 100%.
I don't know that much about space, but I would.
Hey, Geoholics. Quick shout out to Monson Engineering. Monson Engineering is the leading supplier of surveying, GIS mapping, scanning solution products for the design build industry in the Intermountain West since 1974.
Man.
When were you born, Sean?
Not then. They provide cutting-edge design-build technologies and supplies including Trimble GPS, Teledyne Optech 3D scanners, Spectra Precision Total Stations, Tiny Mobile Robots, Emison HoverMap 3D scanners, DJI drones, Sokia levels, and TopCon lasers. These guys pride themselves in being your one-stop shop throughout all the phases of your project, planning to completion.
From drones to lasers, total stations, or high-accuracy GPS equipment, they have what you need when you need it. To learn more, go to monsonengineering.com and be sure to let them know that Geoholic sent you for those deep, deep discounts. Yeah. And now you have a nonprofit, is that correct? Or not-for-profit that you're building?
I do, yeah. It's the Aqua project. It's spelled AERAQUA. I started this project with a couple colleagues of mine back in 2020. I think I was stuck inside and didn't have anything better to do, so I started this thing, and I actually just finally published a website, which is at aeraqua.org. So check it out. There's going to be stories published there on future collaborations and future projects and future surveys. So that's some exciting stuff.
Very cool. You got something over there, Larry?
Yeah, I saw you made mention that you were looking at a P-39. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, and that's a project I've kind of tangentially been involved in for a couple years now. It's a project that was kind of initiated by archaeologist Wayne Lusardi, and they are looking at a Tuskegee Airman aircraft in Lake Huron, and there's
wow.
I mean just Google Google's your friend here. Google Lake Huron Tuskegee, and you'll find tons of stories about this, and that's kind of an ongoing project probably for the next 5 years or so. So lots of cool stuff there.
So here's a fun fact, and because I did some recon on this, I'm like, what's a P-39? Because I'm an aviation buff and a private pilot. I'm like, wow, I know what a P-38 is. I wonder if it's a variant. And I looked at this at this thing, and here's an interesting thing about this airplane. I found out that it has the highest kills for any U.S. fighter flown by any Air Force in any conflict.
Wow.
And was used by the Soviet Air Force.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
So interesting.
So I was like, wow, you enlightened me with that.
You just kind of performed some archaeology there.
Yes, I did.
Yes. Without even knowing it. So you mentioned...
Not to burst your bubble, but I was just looking for one of these books I have, and the book title is something like "Worst Aviation, Products Ever," and the P-39 was in there. So.
Oh yeah, well, from my engineer point of view, yeah, it wasn't ideal compared to the state of the art at that time.
Oh man, that's good stuff. Hunter, you mentioned there's like maybe 100 folks doing what you're doing. Is there like a certification you can get? Like, I know like you have acronyms after your name, RPA. My guess was that was registered professional archaeologist. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah. So I have a master's degree in historical archaeology, and I focused on underwater at basically one of the 3 or 5 schools that do that. And RPA, that's registered professional archaeologist, and that's essentially it's not an official certification or anything. It's essentially saying, yes, I will follow the ethics of a professional archaeologist. And they've got a list of things, but yeah, they're really probably only 3 schools that I would recommend. It's my alma mater, of course, University of West Florida. Texas A&M University somehow has a program in College Station, Texas, nowhere near the coast, I should add.
Yeah.
And then East Carolina University. And then there are a few more popping up here and there, Florida State University and Miami, University of Miami.
Interesting. So I have to ask, of course, there was just that unfortunate accident, week ago?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago.
With those folks that, took the submersible down to the Titanic. Is that something you would ever want to do?
Good question, I'm gonna say, probably not at this point.
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to comment too much on that right now. It's pretty fresh.
Yeah, it's all fresh, right? I get it. You did mention earlier, though, that when you find some of these things, you have to take into consideration, the families or whatever that may be associated with the findings. Is there, are there any ethical considerations that you need to take into account when you are, finding or extracting some of these artifacts?
I think I touched on them briefly earlier, but essentially, as soon as you impact an archaeological site, you're not going to learn anything from it after it's been impacted. Say you take an artifact, that artifact's out of place now. You don't know how it's associated with other artifacts. And so we really take our time when excavating shipwrecks and other things to make sure we're capturing as much information as possible at the time. And the other thing is we want to make sure if we are extracting artifacts from sites that we have plans for the future to preserve these things for future generations to enjoy and to understand and that sort of thing. But and kind of tangentially we make sure, or most of us as archaeologists make sure that we are publishing this data in some format, so it's not just as soon as we dig it up, it's going to a museum and then it just sits there. There's a story behind it, and there's data to be looked at for the future.
Sure. Yeah. We got you there, Larry. Have we got everything that
Well, I'm kind of curious because there's a forensic aspect that it feels like that's part of your job, and kind of going back at what Kent was going after. I wonder maybe if you could elaborate on that. How does that kind of tangentially apply to what you're doing? Because it seems there's a lot of information to be gleaned, and I really understand where you're coming from with the archaeological process. You don't want to disturb the site, but by the same token, there's also information potentially to be learned, like especially if something's newer, like why did something fail? Is there a materials issue? And so let's extract ourselves away from what happened a couple of weeks ago, but just in general, how does archaeology interact with the forensic style of investigation, and whether it's material sciences or whatever?
Yeah, good question.
Sure. So, yeah, that's a great question, and I can't speak too much on the forensic side, but archaeology is a subfield of anthropology, and it just happens to be that biological anthropology is also a subfield, and a lot of folks that go through the biological anthropology field, they end up going into forensics and working for crime scene units and things of that nature, and we do use similar techniques to study crime scenes and archaeological sites in the way that we take our time and everything is methodical and everything is recorded. And there's what is it called when something from a crime scene has to be in custody, all the way back to the police department or wherever this stuff going. It's kind of the same thing with artifacts, is we want to make sure exactly where that stuff came from, so we can write up reports and have full analysis of shipwrecks and things of that nature.
So another question.
Did I kind of answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was looking for. I did have another question because it dawned on me that there are areas of the earth that were once underwater, and now they're no longer underwater. So is that a maritime archaeologist job now, or is it fall into traditional when the water is no longer there, or do you collaborate in some way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there are a bunch of different terms. We call those drowned terrestrial sites, and often we can use similar techniques that we use on land to actually excavate and find some of these sites. And I've worked on a few projects with Texas A&M and Florida State University, looking for submerged terrestrial sites in Florida. And also that was that project I mentioned in Nevada. So, and yes, underwater archaeologists, we absolutely work with terrestrial archaeologists. We're doing the same thing. Just
Hey, Sean.
kind of
What's up, buddy?
Let's talk a little bit about Airworks.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Born at MIT, inspired by the advances in aerial data acquisition and the potential power of AI, Airworks was founded by David Morsnick and Adam Kursnowski in August of 2017.
Yeah, it was. Their complementary backgrounds in aerospace engineering, drones, and construction led to a combined desire to harness the power of technology to automate a traditionally time-consuming aerial data processing approach.
Tell us more.
Sure. Headquartered in Boston, Airworks employs a team of unmatched AI experts, software developers, sales experts, marketers, geographers, and civil engineers, all working together to redefine the future of mapping for the built world.
And some other big news.
Yeah?
We just chatted with David and Adam at GeoWeek last week, and they announced that they have recently formed a strategic partnership with DataSite and Nearmap, strengthening their position in the 3D world, no question. Innovation is definitely in their DNA, and to find out more, simply go to airworks.io.
So I have to imagine that there's a scenario that you play over and over in your mind of the ultimate find. What would that look like?
Me being so aviation obsessed, really, something like Flight 19 that flew out of near Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and never returned. Finding some of the airplanes would just be a highlight of my career, right? I don't think it's ever going to happen, only because it's a big Atlantic Ocean, and I think these things were way offshore, and so there's not a reason to do a project that far offshore in terms of infrastructure and surveying and things of that nature.
Sure. So talking about offshore stuff, there's a lot of, from what I understand, a lot of communication lines and things like that are, on the bottom of the ocean or whatever, running from point to point. Do you guys get involved in any, type projects like that?
Oh, absolutely. And then I think that's our bread and butter. We're involved in a lot of oil and gas, a lot of wind farm development, communication lines, et cetera. And we frequently work with a lot of geophysical survey operators, and we'll put somebody on the boat to observe data coming through. But a lot of what we do is back in the office and going through hundreds and hundreds of lines of geophysical data.
Okay. Cool. What else you got?
Do you work with any of the submersibles and robot type equipment that for situations where traditional scuba is not applicable?
That's a good question. Not directly with search, but we do receive data sets from ROVs and from autonomous underwater vehicles that are unmanned, and so it's basically collecting the same data that a traditional geophysical survey would, and so short answer, yes, tangentially.
Yep, there you go. So if somebody listening was interested in pursuing a career in maritime archaeology, what's some advice you might give them?
Oh, good luck. No, I would definitely reach out to some of those programs that I was talking about earlier: University of West Florida, Texas A&M, East Carolina. Um, it takes a lot of work, and it takes many years to finally break into this. There aren't that many positions out there. Although that being said, there's a lot more infrastructure projects, and so that we're going to need more and more underwater archaeologists to handle that stuff.
Sure.
It's not just the scuba diving. A lot of people come in and they think, "Wow, underwater archaeologists! I'm going to be scuba diving all the time." I maybe it's 10%, and that's
Wow.
pushing it a little bit. But learn things like GIS and report writing, and learn the permits, learn the regulatory stuff. It's all important, and it'll get you a job. As soon as you get into underwater archaeology, we're directly related to the marine remote sensing world, and we work really closely with that crowd. So the way I kind of got in is I graduated, or was about to graduate, with my master's degree, and I went offshore and I surveyed, for months at a time, which was really pretty difficult, being away from family and all that. But it gains you the skills necessary to do this on your own. So it's really important. And also, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer any questions for anybody really interested in this stuff.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Pretty cool. So what are you excited about, like 5 years down the road, if you're looking ahead that far?
Well, I hope I'm still around at that point. I really don't know. I just hope it's something interesting. I'm always trying to, aside from my day-to-day, is be involved in really fascinating, interesting projects. I've got a ton coming up here shortly. Maybe I'll find Flight 19 in the next 5-10 years.
There you go.
I'd like to go get my PhD. That's top of the list. I've always wanted to be Dr. Whitehead for some reason.
There you go.
Because it sounds good.
Yeah.
Or you'd be like my dentist, Dr. Sick. That's his name. You don't want that.
No.
Great dentist, though.
Yep.
Shout out. Free plug. Don't get used to it.
So I'm curious. Scuba diving is part of your career and your job, but from a recreational side, do you scuba dive recreational? And if you do, what is your favorite place to go to?
Well, okay, so I got to start with scuba diving is what got me into underwater archaeology in general. I was going to a business program at the time, and I really despised it. And around the same time, I started scuba diving, and I just decided, hey, this is fun. Let's figure out how to do this the rest of my life. So that being said, yes, I still recreationally scuba dive when I can. Not exactly here in Texas where I'm currently residing. I do a lot of fun projects in Pensacola, looking for those airplanes that I was talking about. But my family and I just went to Roatan, which I gotta say, Roatan is the most beautiful reef I've ever dived. So would highly recommend.
Super cool. Super cool. So we have a question that we ask all of our guests, and I'm going to let Larry ask it because typically Sean asks it, and I believe it's question number 10 on your list there, Larry.
Well, I can ask that question. Do you have a mantra that you live by?
Maybe
He laughs.
But I tell myself and colleagues that I just want to do some interesting work, and I'll go out of my way to collaborate on cool projects, interesting projects. The maritime archaeology field's really small, and so you got to make sure you you have close friends that are doing interesting things.
There you go. Yep. It's good to have interesting friends.
I've got to imagine in your particular world,
Got a lot of interesting friends.
yeah.
No question. About Hunter, before we let you get out of here, is there anything maybe we haven't talked about yet that you want to get out there?
Well, no, I thank you guys so much for inviting me on the show. You know, I will plug again the Aqua project.
Yep.
I've got a website that just recently was published, and that's Aqua, spelled AERAQUA.org. There's going to be future projects and future stories about our work on there. So I'm really hoping to share what we do with the wider audience.
Awesome. Well, great having you on. Really interesting conversation. I've been really looking forward to this because, as I said, until I did my research about the show, I had no idea Maritime Archaeology was such a thing, and such a fascinating thing at that.
Yeah, this actually sent me to a place where I was both interested in your professional career, but when I saw Aqua, I was like, well, hey, being a pilot,
There you go.
and a scuba diver, I'm like,
There you go.
wreck diving on airplanes. Wow,
Yep.
that's cool.
Yeah, that's super cool. All right. Well, hey, Hunter, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it. And maybe in the future, after you have a couple more super cool projects under your belt, we'll have you back and you can tell us about those.
I look forward to it. I'll be Dr. Whitehead at that point.
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Well, here we go. Once again, adding value, making friends. Thank you, Larry Fox, for being my right-hand person this evening.
You are so welcome, sir. It was a
Enjoyed
pleasure.
it? Absolutely. If anyone would like to be a guest on a future show, shoot us an email at info@thegeoholics.com. Fleetwood Mac Don't Stop available everywhere. Stevie Nicks is hot still. Until next time, do cool stuff. And most importantly, stay safe and healthy.